Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and author of The Codist, best-selling biblical thriller on what are they doing with your DNA. You know, there's been so many hacks going on. Your ID's been hacked. Your Social Security number's been hacked. Your driver's license has been hacked. Now they're telling you your home is about to be hacked. Your title deed's about to be hacked. All that. But what if there was something so diabolical, your DNA being hacked? Why? To turn it into a weapon, to wipe out a particular people group. That's the story. Is it real? It's as real as the glasses on my face. This is a real plot unfolding even today out of Tehran in looking to not just send out an arsenal of missiles against Israel, but to wipe out an entire line of people. Read it. $2.99 on Kindle, special going on right now. And if you'll go to ignitingnation.com, go down, scroll down the home page to special offers, you're going to see a cover of this book, The 7 Laws of Abundant Living, Lessons Learned from the Tree of Life. Click on it. Give us your email address. We won't send you spam because spam's not kosher, but we will send you the first chapter of this book for free. And take a journey with us from the Garden of Eden all the way through the River of Life and the lessons that God has taught us. I'm very thrilled to introduce you to, if you haven't been following us, the Joe Newby Hour. Joe Newby, author and co-author of the book Banned: How Facebook Enables Militant Islamic Jihad. He is the chief blogosphere, all things bloggable, at conservativefiringline.com. You can get their daily updates and subscribe at conservativefiringline.com. Joe Newby, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Good afternoon, Eric. It's great to see you again.
It is great to see you. I believe we missed you last month.
Yes, well, yeah.
Yeah,
that's okay.
it happens, and we're actually going to miss you next month because I'm going to be in Israel. So we're going to have to get to all things bloggable. So, Joe, this about 6 or 7 of our conversations have been about the 9th District Court and its ridiculous rulings last year. And all of a sudden now we, a couple of days ago, get a ruling or a statement out of the U.S. District Court, Judge T.S. Ellis, who comes out with a statement that it's all of a sudden is having a ripple effect on the world. And tell me about that. You wrote a piece on May the 4th about the judge in the Manafort case who made a stunning statement, politically charged and legally charged, legally sound.
Well, finally, Eric, we have someone in the judiciary who has the guts to come out and say what most of us have been saying about this whole Robert Mueller witch hunt / fishing expedition. And when he cornered Robert Mueller's attorneys and basically said, look, this is all about you trying to find information, trying to get something that you can use to impeach Donald Trump and get him out of office, isn't it? And what can they say? Of course it is. We all know that it is. And it's not just that. I mean, that I think has opened up a floodgate. I heard something just this morning I shared with you earlier about one of the 13 Russian entities or individuals. In this case, it was one of the companies that Robert Mueller indicted for supposedly, allegedly gaming the Facebook systems by buying ads on the social media site. Well, the company has decided to respond, and they're going to defend themselves. And this is something that Mueller and his team, no doubt, weren't expecting. After all, they didn't expect any of these Russians to actually come and defend themselves. This was all a PR thing to mollify the Democrats, the Never Trumpers, and the media, and to give them more talking points about how everybody's a Russian. You and I are all, we're Russians now. I don't know if you knew that or not, but we're Russians now, according to all the higher ups, all the folks in social media and so forth. Well, one of these companies has decided to say, no, we're going to stand up, we're going to defend ourselves. And from what I heard this morning, and I'm still digging into the particulars, Mueller and his team are looking to delay this because in order for them to respond, they naturally have to provide all the evidence that they have against this outfit. So I don't think they're really too hip on doing that, because I think if they did, all of us would learn, um, once and for all, that this was all a fishing expedition. It was all made up. It was just intended as part of a coup d'etat against Donald Trump. And you know, I've gone to the point now, Eric, I don't consider this a probe of Russia collusion. There is no collusion. They've had over a year. They haven't found any collusion. There's not a single iota of evidence to suggest there's collusion. In my view, Eric, this is nothing but a coup d'etat on the part of what everybody now calls the deep state, the establishment, the entrenched Washington, D.C. folks, to get Donald Trump out of office. And I think we're about ready to hit the tipping point on all this, Eric. I think it's about to all become exposed for what it really is.
The other day when Rudy Giuliani um joined the team, the Trump team,
Mm-hmm.
I thought he had a Scaramucci moment. When he spoke out about this payment. Uh, Now new affidavits are being brought to light saying that for four different periods of time, this accusation has been floating around, and now a public statement has been issued and verified by none other than the Washington Post, saying that there's an affidavit that Stormy Daniels says that she never had any kind of dealings with Donald Trump. Uh, a payment, not a payment, $130,000, not $130,000, Michael Cohen, not Michael Cohen. What's the backstory on this?
Well,
And
number one, Eric, I would just recommend everybody take anything that they hear or read or see out of the Washington Post with a grain of salt, at least until after it's been corroborated by some actual outlets. People who do actual investigative journalism. And I say that halfway tongue in cheek because this is the same Washington Post who once came out and said that people with certain haircuts, short haircuts, are probably white nationalists or something along that line. So I would, I would take what they say initially with a grain of salt. Um, this whole thing with Stormy Daniels, and I've tended to avoid Stormy Daniels because to me this is nothing more than a salacious affair. Look, we all knew what kind of a person we were getting with Donald Trump socially. We all knew that he was a very worldly man in his um, youth, relatively speaking, to today. Um, we all knew that this was a guy who, well, let's face it, he likes the girls. Um, so whether he had, an affair with Stormy Daniels or whether he had an affair with 10 porn stars at one time, not that I approve of it, I don't. Um, but quite frankly, that's a matter between him and God. Isn't that what they said about Bill Clinton? The big difference, though, is that Bill Clinton did his dirty business in the Oval Office with an intern, and or in the governor's mansion, or in his official role as governor of the great state of Arkansas, which, by the way, really is a great state. I've got family there, and there's a wonderful woman by the name of Jan Morgan running for governor there, and I hope she wins. Um, so, having said all that, Stormy Daniels has pretty much become the left's new mascot. They had her on Saturday Night Live and they asked her, from what I gathered, they asked her what would she like, and she said for Donald Trump to resign. Well, guess what? That's not going to happen. Okay, uh, this whole thing with what Rudy Giuliani said, and let me just say back, I discovered here that. Here a while back that Mr. Scaramucci follows me on Twitter. Um,
Okay.
so, with all due respect to Mr. Scaramucci, I have a great deal of respect for the man. I
Yes.
just want to get that out there in public. Um, and I also have a great deal of respect for Mr. Giuliani, who has served with distinction, for years. Um, not as a U.S. attorney and as mayor of New York, I disagree with him on some social issues, but that's neither here nor there. Um, I think Rudy Giuliani put this the best way that he possibly could, and he explained it in a way that actually needed to be explained. The big talking point on the left is that this money that was given to Stormy Daniels was supposedly campaign funds. Well, Giuliani said in no uncertain terms, no, this was not campaign funds. This came out of funds that Trump had paid as a retainer to Michael Cohen. Um, so, from my perspective, this is nothing more than a transaction that took place between Cohen and Daniels, if it happened at all. Um, and I don't, I personally don't see that there's any there, quite frankly. This is just something else for the left to dig up and dredge up and try to turn into something that's not. It's a distraction. That's all it is. It's a distraction. And if we're going to go down this road of $130,000 being paid to Stormy Daniels out of Donald Trump's own money, what about the hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not maybe millions of dollars, that has been paid of taxpayer funds that have been paid off to deal with, or to cover up, sweep under the carpet, whatever, however you want to put it, um, allegations of sexual misconduct by actual sitting members of Congress? What about that? Why aren't we up in arms over that? But yet we're going to get up in arms over $130,000 to Stormy Daniels.
The deep state concept, the swamp concept, these are all things that we understand, and we've almost got this elite group of politicians that may come from humble farm beginnings, but after 50 years in Congress, they're multi-millionaires because they've gotten every kind of gift and every kind of opportunity and insider trading and all the things that go along with it. So term limits comes up as a concept that says that, were we ever supposed to have career politicians? The answer, according to all the writings, the Federalist Papers and all that go with it, is absolutely not. That the Senate was supposed to have term limits.
Right.
You were never supposed to get in this position of a John McCain,
Yeah.
who killed the Obamacare reform for pure spite, not for this country, not for anything, but because he was angry with Donald Trump for the accusation that getting caught and made a prisoner of war does not make you a hero.
Right.
Not getting caught and winning battles and putting your life on the line in the service of saving someone's life might make you a hero, but being caught didn't constitute you becoming or being considered a hero. So he took that very personally and shut down his first piece of major legislation. Right?
Well, McCain has gone much further than that. He has actually worked to stymie everything that Donald Trump has done. And from my perspective, Eric, it's rather childish on McCain's part to act the way that he's acting. I understand, why he would be upset with Donald Trump, but good grief. He's supposed to be an adult, okay? Look at what was thrown at Ted Cruz during the primary. Oh my gosh. Donald Trump threw the kitchen sink and then some at Ted Cruz. Now, did Ted Cruz take it personally? Yeah, I would think so for a while, but he got over it. He dealt with it, and now you have Donald Trump endorsing Ted Cruz to be U.S. senator from the state of Texas. All right, they get along. John McCain is incapable rather, of apparently of doing that. And just look at what he said over the weekend. Okay, he doesn't want Trump at his funeral. Oh, Mike Pence is okay, but not Donald Trump. Oh, and he regrets bringing on Sarah Palin as his 2008 running mate. Well, I got news for you, Mr. McCain. I don't care what you did during the Vietnam War. The only reason that many of us voted for you is, well, Sarah Palin. That was the only part of his ticket, in
Right.
my view, that was worth voting for. Um, the only other thing is that we had that would have made him um, attractive enough to vote for was because we didn't want another liberal Marxist Democrat in office
Right.
with Barack Obama. Um, but outside of that, there was nothing there. There was no there there. You know, the, he is harder on Republicans, always has been, much harder on Republicans than he's ever been with Democrats. Look at what he did to Rand Paul, okay? Telling Rand Paul that he is essentially working as an agent of the Russians. And he did that on the floor of the Senate. I mean, Eric, this man has become bitter, angry, cantankerous, even more so than normal. Um, if I was Donald Trump and I say, okay, fine, McCain doesn't want me at his funeral, big deal. I don't want to be there anyway if that's the way he's going to be, you know. Uh, so, this is nothing new for McCain.
But the problem is the pettiness of the political climate of
Hmm.
today.
Hmm.
This is the most offended, petty government that's ever sat in office, in my opinion,
Yes.
that is supposed to be representing the constituency and in no way, shape, or form represents the constituency. Uh, Donald Trump continues to try to get legislation passed, and he's done an amazing job
Oh,
of
yes.
deregulating. He's done an amazing job and I don't like anybody that uses language which I find unbecoming of a believer.
Right.
I don't like behavior and innuendo or personal attacks. I'm a strong subscriber in walking this Christian walk, but in fact, the man is a baby believer.
Right.
And I know in the first couple of years of my walk with the Lord, I said a whole lot of wrong things to a whole lot of wrong people in a whole lot of wrong ways and was brought to correction for it. And when faced with the correction, realized the error of my ways and, of
Right.
course, took the right attitude in repenting for it. But, if you grow up in the world and you come out of the world into the world of faith, you're not instantly transformed
No.
into a celestial being. You're
Right.
not instantly transformed into the image of Christ. And so the fact that he continues, do I like his style? Honestly, I don't like his style.
Right.
It reminds me of my coming up through the ranks of corporate America.
Hmm.
I climbed up on the backs of others by either outperforming or outpositioning or
Right.
outmaneuvering rather than doing it on raising the water so that all the boats rise along with me.
Right.
So it's a little reminiscent of that. But when I take a look at the accomplishments, North and South Korea talking for the first
Oh my
time,
gosh.
and a potential, if not highly likely, end to the Korean War.
A
Uh,
68-year-long war,
right. That was
which, by the way, no other president has even come close to this point. None. Not Barack Obama, not George Bush, not George H.W. Bush, not even Ronald Reagan. Um, this is the closest we've ever come to seeing peace on the Korean Peninsula.
you know, I'm 66 years old, which means
Mm-hmm.
that I was born during the Korea War.
Right.
Uh, Truman was in office. Eisenhower was being inaugurated. Uh, is that right? Yes.
Yeah.
And you know, you grew up with it around you, so you never really thought about it.
Right.
You met people that fought in Korea, but it wasn't a social issue like Vietnam was.
Right.
So we were still recovering from the Holocaust while the rest of the world was engaged in looking at the Korean Peninsula and what was going on there with China and Japan and Taiwan and Hong Kong and Phnom Penh and Seoul and all of these other things that, you know, didn't really make, they were rolling out contemporary history, but it wasn't contemporary history in my world. In my Jewish world, we were recovering from the Holocaust and trying to get Jews out of Russia and trying to get our people back home and reunited with their families. And we had our own issues, so I didn't know much about the Korean War. So when I heard that this is still an ongoing war, that is still classified as it has never ended.
That's right. It's never ended. You know, both my dad and my father-in-law fought in Korea. My dad was in the newly minted U.S. Air Force at the time, and I've heard stories from him. He was an aircraft mechanic back in the day, and I remember hearing stories from him about quite literally hiding under airplanes, armed with nothing but a wrench, and watching the hordes of enemy soldiers come over the hill, and then seeing them get chased back by U.S. and Allied forces. My father-in-law was a combat engineer in the U.S. Army and operated at that time one of, if not the largest rock crusher in the world back in those days. And he worked on a tunnel that is still in operation over there in Korea. It actually makes a nice U-turn inside a mountain. And he's got quite some stories to tell about that. Now, my dad's passed away. He's since gone to be with the Lord. My father-in-law is still around, and so I truly hope that President Trump can negotiate a peace, an end to that war. I think that would be fitting for both my dad's memory and for my father-in-law. I think they both deserve to see that.
Well, it's a very interesting drama playing out
Mm-hmm.
At simultaneous time of the 70th anniversary of Israel, concurrent with
Absolutely.
the moving the embassy, concurrent with the Iran nuclear deal coming up for review, concurrent with Israel being active in taking out an Iranian missile base in Syria, and now Iran preparing a response. And then Cambridge Analytica announces that they're going out of business because of the Facebook hack, and that this brought them to their knees. And we're talking with the author of the book that really kind of blew the lid off of how Facebook really operates in this book, Banned. You know, when it came out and we covered its release, it was very, very relevant to ISIS and to what was going on and how they were leaning towards this becoming the platform for recruitment for Islamic Jihad. But you and Adina were early on in discovering that there is an agenda which runs the Facebook platform.
And still runs it.
And still runs it. Now the algorithms, and now the testimony of Zuckerberg, and now all this. But you were there long before it became popular to talk about this Facebook. And so if people need to know the backstory, they need to understand it. This is the book for them, Banned, by Adina Kutnicki and Joe Newby, How Facebook Enables Militant Islamic Jihad. And Joe Newby, host of the Joe Newby Hour right here on the Igniting Nation Broadcasting Network. and also the chief blogger at conservativefiringline.com. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk some more about the convergence of events, all hitting at the same time in the next 30 days, what that window looks like, and I will be in Israel during some of that time when those plans will be announced and will unfold. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our 1-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker. We're talking with Joe Newby, co-author of the book Banned, How Facebook Enables Militant Islamic Jihad, and the chief blogger at conservativefiringline.com. Joe, welcome back to the program.
Good to be here, Eric. Good to see you again.
Joe, we have a convergence of events unlike anything we've ever seen in all of the Bible.
Right.
The timing of and let me just list them off. You've got the Iran nuclear deal. You have the embassy opening in Jerusalem. You have the 70th anniversary of the fig tree blossoming of the independence of Israel. We have, concurrent with that, is the fall of the British Empire.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? At that point in time of Israel's independence, the statement was the sun never stopped shining on the British Empire.
Right. It never sets on the British Empire.
Sun never sets on the British Empire. It was 2 years later that it wound up that the British Empire folded. It completely collapsed. Now we have a new empire rising, and it's taken on the form of something that is not geopolitical. It is the Islamic Empire, and it's not the Ottomans of Turkey. It's not. It is Islam, comprised of the descendants of Ishmael, the descendants of Esau, and the descendants of Lot. And they happen to live in these countries: Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. Mm-hmm. They spill over into the countries of Turkey and spill over into the countries of Iran. So all of a sudden now we're faced with this multiplexity of, you have Erdogan, who is the European gateway for Israel. You have you have Egypt, which is the African gateway to Israel, and then you have Israel, which is Asia, right there in the middle. It's the only place that this exists where you have this land bridge, this land mass of Israel, which is the gateway country between Europe and Africa, comprising the only three continents mentioned in the Bible: Asia, Africa, and Europe. That's all there is mentioned in the Bible. So how do you see these events stacking up, and what does that look like biblically? Because you two are also a student of Scripture.
Well, biblically, here's how I see it, Eric. If one wants to take a look at two very important chapters in the Bible, two of my favorite chapters, by the way, I must add, besides, of course, the book of John, Ezekiel 38 and 39. And if somebody, in my opinion, wants to say, well, has any of this ever been prophesied? How does this all stack up?
Right.
I would have to point them to Ezekiel 38 and 39. And when you look at those two chapters, in my opinion, and you do a study of those, and you take a look at what others have said, you come to realize that, wait a minute, Ezekiel wrote about all this well over 2,000 years ago. He talks about an alliance being formed between, at that time, Gog and Magog, which we now understand to be Russia, and Persia, which we now know as Iran. Actually, not just Iran, but Iraq and Iran, which at that time comprised the Persian Empire. And then you take a look at, as we talked about earlier, Gomer, which, as we understand, to be Germany, or to be more, or in my opinion, to be a little bit more correct, Western Europe.
Right.
So you take a look at all of these countries that are involved, and of course Saudi Arabia is mentioned, not as Saudi Arabia, but by the name of the individual who actually, I believe, was a descendant of Noah, who actually ended up living there, as well as Turkey. um, and their roles in all of this. And when you read Ezekiel 38 and 39, and you see the roles that all of these peoples are taking, and you look at what's happening over there right now, guess what? They all match up. It all lines up. Um, I believe the time is coming, Eric, and it may not be too far off. I think we're going to see ahead to all of this that was predicted in Scripture thousands of years ago, written by a man who had absolutely no knowledge of modern day events, absolutely no knowledge of modern foreign policy or modern diplomacy. Uh, there is one part of that, though, that disturbs me, um, and that is the very real possibility that a nuclear device could, in fact, be detonated in, around, or above the state of Israel, because there's a section of that, as you and I talked about earlier, that hits me quite, close to my home where I'm at, because what I see when I read that are specialists actually dealing with the aftermath of an attack by a weapon of mass destruction, quite possibly a nuclear device even. Um, that's how I read it. And when I see what's happening over there now, and I balance that against what I read in those two passages of scripture, it brings it home to me. But there is one very important point, Eric, in my view, and that is at the end of all that, God says something that is very, very important. The people of Israel are mine again. Um, and that to me is extremely, extremely important. I think that's probably the key to the whole thing, because there will come a point in time where Israel, I believe, will recognize once again their place in the whole grand scheme of things, and I believe they will return back to the Lord of the Scriptures, to the God of the Bible, um, and God will accept them as that. I don't think He's ever really, you know, said He's done with them. But there has been a time where there have been some difficulties there between the two, and I think that's going to end eventually.
Well, we see it clearly stated from a biblical perspective. Genesis 15 establishes the border of Israel, which, if you look
Right.
at the biblically mandated borders of Israel, there is no Syria, there is no Lebanon, there is no Iraq, there is no Jordan, there is
Right.
no northern Saudi Arabia, there's no northern Egypt. That's all sovereign Israel.
Right.
Now, God made an irrevocable covenant with Abraham.
Right.
Before he asked Abraham to do anything for him, God confirmed his covenant with Abraham in this passage
That's right.
where this is irrevocable. Now, when the Exodus came, Moses was told to explain to the children of Israel that the enjoyment of the land, not the ownership of the land, but the
Right.
enjoyment of the land, would be
Right.
predicated on whether or not they obeyed God's laws and God's instructions.
Right.
In 586 BC, when we were dispersed into Babylonian captivity, because of our backslidden ways, the ownership, the title to the land was not removed.
No.
The enjoyment of the land was. It wasn't a foreclosure, it was
No.
an eviction.
Right.
Right? And it was a temporary eviction. As a matter of fact, Egypt will experience the same thing in the end times for 40 years. They will be evicted from Egypt for a 40-year period for the
Right.
40 years that they caused us to wander. God has recompense, but they too will go through that period where Egypt still belongs to the sovereignty of the Egyptians, but they won't enjoy the land because God says He's going to disperse them for 40 years before He brings them back to worship them. So this is not a situation where this is a replacement theology and that the
No.
church has taken the place of it. Israel's place is clearly established and secure in Scripture. So we have a man named Erdogan who is slick and savvy.
Yeah.
He is a NATO partner, but he is a friend to Iran and a friend to Russia and a friend to terrorist organizations such as Hezbollah and Hamas, and is greatly being influenced as proxy for what Vladimir Putin would like to do in the region, and that is equip every one of the surrounding countries of Israel with Russian military to support his economy and
Right.
to support
Right.
his war machine. And the difference is that I still want to call him Soviets because he acts so much like a Soviet. Uh,
Yeah.
uh, the Russian agenda is different than the American and Israeli agenda. Israel buys planes from America and then modifies the planes to suit their own needs, and then comes and trains American pilots on these modified planes, and
Right.
sends them back and says, if you want to tweak yours, here's how to do it, but here's the kind of systems we put in. And they're always fascinated because they're the best pilots in the world.
Right.
Russia wants to send their missiles, and they want to send their scientists, and they want to send their fighters, and they want to send their pilots, and they want to establish a presence because they're looking for colonization along with war,
Right.
so that they can expand their territory. We saw them do that in Crimea. We see them making the attempt to do that in Ukraine. If they can't annex through colonization in the former Soviet Union of Belarusia, and all of the Wanias and all the Wanias and the stands,
Right. Right.
and he can't get them, then he goes after other unstable territory, so that he can protect the oil pipeline and the gas pipeline that gets to Siberia,
Right.
because otherwise he's got tens of millions of his population that unfortunately are still under Russian authority. And Siberia is a big part of Russia.
Yep.
And that's an interesting dynamic because that's located in two continents.
Right.
That Russia is actually occupies part of Europe and part of Asia.
Right.
And most people don't really understand that.
Correct.
And where they ignore a lot of the prophecy is that if you go north of Jerusalem, you pass through Ankara
Right.
before you ever get to Moscow. So you wind up having to engage Turkey somehow, and it keeps slipping off the radar because you've got the Iranian war drums, you've got the Russian war drums, you've got the Muslim Islamic war drums, you've got the Palestinian war drums, and nobody's paying attention to what's going on in Turkey. How does that play out in your mind?
Well, I think eventually Turkey is going to step in. I think eventually. I mean, if we're looking at this scripturally, if we're looking at what prophecy says, and we look at this scripturally, I think at some point, yes, Turkey will step in. They've already made some inroads, essentially testing the waters already. Turkey doesn't like the Kurds. They don't really care for what's going on. Erdogan wants to set himself up as this big kahuna, maybe as the next, what do they call him, a caliph or whatever.
Right.
So I think eventually they will step in. They're going to have to step in. And if I may, Eric, I'd like to share with you and your audience um, a verse or two out of Ezekiel 39, if I may. This is toward the very end, after everything has happened, after the big cleanup, and toward the end of that chapter, um, in Ezekiel 39, verse 23, God says, "The Gentiles shall know that the house of Israel went into captivity for their iniquity, because they were unfaithful to me. Therefore I hid my face from them. I gave them into the hands of their enemies, and they all fell by the sword." And he goes on, but I'd like to go all the way down to the very end at verse 28, where he says, "Then they shall know," speaking of the Israelites, "and they shall know that I am the Lord their God, who sent them into captivity among the nations, but also brought them back to their land, and left none of them captive any longer." And the chapter ends with this: "And I will not hide my face from them any more, for I shall have poured out my spirit on the house of Israel, says the Lord God." And yes, it's terrible. It's bad what's happening. It's bad what's going to happen. Um, but you know what, Eric? We have hope because we know how it all ends. We were told how it's all going to end over 2,000 years ago. So yes, it's going to be horrible. It's going to be even worse than it is now. Um, those of us who are believers may or may not be here to see that all happen.
Right.
Um, I think it was, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a fellow, I think his name was Robert Anderson, who wrote a book about prophecy in the Middle East after he studied these scriptures, and he came away with the impression that essentially the generation that sees Israel come together as a nation
Yes.
will not pass before all of this takes place. Well, what's a generation? A generation is what, 70, 80 years?
Well, it really, there's several,
Biblically speaking?
biblically speaking, there's several definition of a generation, anywhere from
Right.
from 70 up to 100 years. Now,
Right.
the fig tree, this is called the fig tree prophecy, and so that's where Jesus said, when you see the fig tree blossom, okay, that generation will not pass away until the great day of the coming of the Lord. Now, the great day of the coming of the Lord is not the return of Jesus. That is the beginning of the tribulation period, where there's 3.5 years of peace, and Jewish worship is restored. And this is the whole dichotomy of what's happening. First of all, Jerusalem is a sacred city, both to the Jews, to the Muslims, and to the Christians. So any attempt Iran would make to attack Israel would have to be, it couldn't be anywhere near Jerusalem, because you've got the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which are two shrines and considered to be quote-unquote holy sites within their own, second only to Mecca. So Jerusalem and the region surrounding Jerusalem is secure.
Right.
Now, all the threats have been for military bases in the Golan Heights, which were taken in the 67 war when Israel took back, after being attacked, took back and regained, which is where the oil reserves are, which is where the gas reserves are, which fulfills one of the parts of Ezekiel 38, which says that Israel will have so much wealth that the world would want to plunder it. Well, before these discoveries of the Leviathan gas off of Haifa and the oil reserves underneath the mountains of the Golan Heights, which happen to sit on the border of Syria to the north and Lebanon to the west, northwest side of, you're looking over here, so you're looking kind of northwest Syria and then Lebanon. You stand at a place called Mount Bental, and you look out, and Damascus is 65 kilometers away. You can see the suburbs of Damascus with the naked, unassisted eye. No binoculars. You can see it, and you hear the mortar fire, and you hear the machine gun fire, and you see the tank movement down in the Valley of Tears, which is what it was called. And then you see the outpost up on the mountainside, where the Lebanese outpost is facing the Israeli outpost. And so you know exactly the line going through them, which is the border, because they're on either side of the border. So this is where all this is going to come together. And we're seeing this. So we have another prophecy at play, and that is Isaiah 17, which is the prophecy about Damascus and the northern kingdom, the northern territory, and the northern peoples of Israel, which is that Golan Heights, all the way to the ocean, or to the Mediterranean, to Haifa, which is the port city. So we're in these incredibly prophetic times. As a matter of fact, I'm going to tell people to go to conservativefiringline.com, read Adina's blog from May the 3rd, Turkey's Dangerous Islamic Thrust via its Arabian partners. Will Americans stand up to Erdogan or pretend what isn't? Is a great blog by Adina,
yes, it is.
the co-author of Banned along with you. Joe,
and if I may just step in here, Adina doesn't mince words.
No.
I'm telling you, she does not mince words. If you want to know what it is, she will tell you. She's not going to soft pedal it.
No, I would consider her to be a formidable editorial commentator, investigative journalist who cares about the quality of her content. And one of the things the conservative firing line, and there's a lot of places to get your information, there's a lot of people you can follow, but Joe and I have become good friends, and he represents a very well-rounded view on many of the things that we would call the headlines and biblical truth, falling into those categories. So we have Joe here on the first of the month, right here on the Igniting Nation Broadcasting Network on Revealing the Truth. Joe, we've run out of time, as we always do, with so much more to say. We should probably do an all-day talk show.
We probably could.
And we could probably do that. But we look forward to seeing you again. Once again, the book is called Banned: How Facebook Enables Militant Islamic Jihad. Authors Joe Newby. Joe, we look forward to seeing you. Won't be in July, but we'll be back in August after Israel. I'll give you an Israel update firsthand. I may do a couple of podcasts while I'm there. And so we're good friends on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and YouTube and all those places that we're at. Yes. You're there too. And so until we see you next time, we tell you shalom, my friend.
Shalom.
Thank you. And that brings to an end our live broadcast day, but that doesn't mean we go off the air. We broadcast 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all over the world in every time zone around the world. We just got an email from Nigeria of a young man that gave his life to the Lord after watching one of our programs. So we know that we are reaching the nations. Our mission is to heal the nations with the Word of God right here on Revealing the Truth. So until we see you back here tomorrow live at 9 a.m. Central Time for Revealing the Bible, followed by 3 hours of Revealing the Truth interviews. Until we see you here tomorrow, we bid you shalom.